Hey, welcome to another edition of the Chiefs Outsiders podcast. And this is one heck of a time to be a Chiefs fan. And today I want to talk a little bit, among all the details of the game, I want to talk a little bit about not normalizing greatness. Because that's the biggest danger for a Chiefs fan, is to blink and miss what's happening. Because that felt like could have been an all-time moment as far as regular season games.
Yeah.
But it's not even the best outcome or ending that the Chiefs have had in that stadium in the last 12 months.
Yeah.
Because Travis Kelce walked off a game that felt pretty similar in overtime in a situation where the Chargers would have taken over first place in the division.
I was going to say, it's not even the best game Travis Kelce has had in the second game of the year on the road against the Chargers in the last year.
Absolutely phenomenal. And I think it's important. We are going to talk about things. There were a few bad things that the Chiefs did, and they need to do better in this game, and we'll try to hit all of that. But I want to start off talking about make the big thing the big thing. And the big thing was Mahomes was amazing like he always is, but Travis Kelce at 33 years old on those touchdown plays, and even the one up the sideline in the first quarter where he just bends the corner and leaves two guys and picks up another 20 yards, that performance by Kelce was phenomenal.
It's unbelievable. It really is that he is already on an unmatched run of greatness at the tight end at the tight end position in terms of production and consistency, and he is on pace to have the greatest season for a tight end ever in receptions, yardage, and touchdowns. Like that, and like you said, he's 33 years old, and just like the Chiefs before the season, everyone was predicting the Chiefs to fall off. There were so many people talking about Travis Kelce being 33 years old and saying he can't do this forever.
How much longer can he do it? Well, he's having the best season of his career, and that's really saying something. All right, so we've started with Mahomes and Kelce. Let's just go through the overall offensive performance in the game, where Kansas City put up 30 points, but it felt like the Chargers were a little bit lucky that that is all we put up. Because to start with, this is a team that cashes in touchdowns a lot more than they settle for field goals. We started off settling for 2 field goals.
Yeah, and it's kind of just the common theme over the last several years that at this point in the season, the Chiefs are just constantly trying to refine their game, and they use the term a lot, trying to play a complete game. And often we don't see it until the playoffs. We still haven't seen it this year. It's always a turnover here, a penalty here that kills a drive, special teams mistakes, and that was no different this week. We had several drives that we effectively were ended by penalties. The fumble by McKinnon, which is extremely uncharacteristic.
So in the first 2 drives, you had situations where we get into the red zone and there seems like there should have been some pass interference called, and those would have been touchdown drives. And you had Kelce drop a ball inside the 5-yard line. Well, he had a phenomenal game, like 90%. That's a walk-in touchdown for Kelce. And so it was kind of some fortune going the Chargers' way, actually. And I thought there were several bad calls, actually. Mm-hmm. Officiating slanted towards the Chargers in the first half, for sure.
Yeah. And it really was, those first 2 drives were both ended by questionable at best, no calls, but it was the entire first half that the Chiefs didn't catch a single break and only managed to be down a touchdown.
Yeah, and there were a couple plays that they just didn't hit, and that's execution. You either hit the play or you don't on third downs, and that's football. So saying, oh, it was just a drop here, that's part of what kind of a team you are. But overall, the offensive execution was phenomenal, and there were points in that game because that was the best running game we've had, at least since Tampa Bay, if not all year. as far as just being effective with the running game.
Mm-hmm.
And there were points where we felt like they weren't running it enough, but it's also partially dictated by the defense. And I mean, you got to give a lot of credit to that running game.
Yeah, they talked about it a lot on the broadcast that was the first time the Chiefs had had a 100-yard rusher since the Week 4 game against the Eagles last season. They went 27 carries for 160 yards as a team, like 6 a carry. Pacheco, 15 for 107, looked really good doing it. I was advocating all game long for them to run the ball more, and this was about as often as you'll see an Andy Reid team run the football.
Yep. And as far as just being a pure runner, handing off the ball, and I feel like Pacheco is the best pure running back that the Chiefs have had since Jamal Charles. Even Kareem Hunt, in his short time playing for the Chiefs, was a better all-around player because he was so deadly out of the backfield. And Pacheco has room to grow in his blocking, and he got blown up by Derwin James. But just when they hand him the ball, I just feel like something good's going to happen. I feel like he maximizes it with power and speed. Andy Reid kind of talked about how they had slowed him down in how he attacks the line of scrimmage. He's a little more patient getting started, but then once you get started, there's no hesitation. He looks really good running.
Yeah, I think you're starting to see that's the cliche of the game starting to slow down for him, and it's all rookies. It just takes a certain amount of time, a certain amount of snaps, and just seeing how the speed of the game flows.
And then you had Hilaire come up with the injury after he'd basically been benched, and since he's been here, a little underperforming and kind of injury prone. And I think it's unfortunate because I've been rooting for him, but it feels like just who he's going to be, and I don't think he's going to get a second contract in Kansas City. So it's a good time for Pacheco to emerge.
It's starting to feel like his days might be numbered. Like, I don't think by any means he's a lock to make the team next season.
Yeah, and so that does leave a void because Kansas City is going to dress 3 running backs in every game. So Ronald Jones has been sitting on the roster. He, as a pure runner, he's a good running back. I liked him last year, but he's had some fumbling problems, and there's a reason that he got moved to 4th on the depth chart. But now he should be active and probably getting a minimum number of actual plays per game. But you're not going to hand the ball to McKinnon 100 or 20 times in a game. So when Pacheco needs spelled, you've got to have that third guy, or heaven forbid you have another running back injury. But
yeah,
and then so we should see a little bit of Ronald Jones, and that's why they didn't release him when he was clamoring to be released. And then also Derek Gore is a free agent, so there's a chance that we see Derek Gore back on the roster.
Yeah, I think that move would make a lot of sense. And Ronald Jones, I'm very curious. I think you're right. He will definitely be active. But I'm very curious because typically, especially in his time in Kansas City, for a running back to get significant playing time in the Andy Reid offense, you have to be able to pass protect as a minimum, but typically you also have to be able to catch the ball out of the backfield. And those are 2 things that Ronald Jones has not done well at any point in his career. It's what kept him from getting on the field in Tampa Bay with Brady, who values those 2 things above anything else out of a running back. And so we'll see if he can pick those up or if he's in a much more limited role.
Now, the team's been trying to do a 3 running back rotation, and because they like Hilaire. But it almost feels like with Pacheco and McKinnon, you're covering all your bases. Because McKinnon is a great blocker. He's a capable runner. Because he specializes in 2 other things, we kind of act like he can't run the ball, but he's a good running back. But he's also a great blocker and a great pass receiving threat, and just had his first fumble since 2017.
Yeah, and I think what you see there is the draft capital of Clyde complicating that, because I think for any other team in the league, you see the skill sets and how they complement each other of Pacheco and McKinnon, and I don't think any other teams would be trying to force a third guy into that, because you have two guys who do both of the things that you want out of the backfield really well and complement each other.
Yep. So hopefully we don't see a whole lot of any third running back, but my immediate thought when I saw Hilaire was, I'm glad we didn't release Ronald Jones.
Yeah.
Because you need to have that other guy. So running game was good. Mahomes, once again, 2 weeks in a row where he didn't need a whole lot of magic.
Mm-mm.
He's gotten so good at just getting the ball out quickly and making the routine play. It's the early in his career criticism was, does he sometimes try to make magic happen when there is a routine play available? And right now he is taking that routine play consistently, and that's what we need.
He was phenomenal, and it's almost not worth talking about because we expect it from him. We're just so accustomed to seeing him have these kind of games where the offense doesn't feel like it can be stopped outside of when they stop themselves. And it's like we started the introduction is having Mahomes and Kelsey and Andy and watching 3 first ballot Hall of Famers every Sunday just lead this offense to 30 points every week. It's remarkable.
Yeah, don't normalize greatness, because any other Chiefs quarterback in my lifetime, and there have been a couple of pretty good performers. I mean, Trent Green and Alex Smith had good runs in Kansas City where they led high-scoring offenses. And Alex Smith at one point was an MVP caliber. His last season, his statistics almost warranted an MVP candidacy.
Yeah.
And that would have been a career game for him. And we normalize it now because he does it so much. But, I mean, just like the throw to Jody Fortson.
It was unbelievable. It was truly in the only place you could put that ball. And it was one of those balls, I think Collinsworth said it on the broadcast, that it's almost impossible to drop because he put his hands out and the ball was just there.
Yep. And it was perfect coverage, and it was just a perfect throw, which is perfect throw is going to win every time.
Mm-hmm.
So, great game from Mahomes, as always. And one of the underappreciated things is just limiting negative plays. Because if you compare pass blocking and pass rush for each team, I felt like, especially in the first half, the Chargers were winning the line of scrimmage and the pass rush downs more than the Chiefs were.
On both sides.
Mahomes was under more pressure more often than Herbert, but Herbert was sacked 5 times. And, I mean,
Mahomes was sacked
one
by
time.
James.
Yeah. And there were so many plays where it could have been a sack, and it wasn't.
And it speaks to Mahomes' greatness at avoiding contact and avoiding sacks. But also, I think in that second half, the offensive line really, once they got the flow of the game and they were comfortable in it, they stepped up. And I think we're not alone. Most Chiefs fans were very critical of Orlando Brown for the first 7-8 weeks of the season. I think he's had a handful of really good games in a row, proving his value. Trey Smith, I think, is finally maybe starting to get back on the better side of the health issues that were hampering him early in the year. Andrew Wiley, I think, was all right despite the sprained elbow. You know, it's
a weird thing that it seems like Spagnuolo always has a defense that starts off rough and improves throughout the season. This is 2 years in a row when I've felt like Orlando Brown did that. And it's not something that you're used to saying about a player like that, but the first 4 or 5 weeks of last season, I really thought Orlando Brown was a bust. I'm like, this guy cannot play.
Yeah.
And then he finished the season pretty good, actually.
Mm-hmm.
And then this season he started off really rough again. And maybe, I mean, you got to figure out what's going on there and see if we can straighten out the first half of the season. But if we can see him play at that level the second half of the season, that's a big, I mean, you look for internal upgrades during a season, and that's an opportunity for one.
Yeah. And speaking of that, Lucas Niang, we're assuming, will be activated tomorrow. And it kind of shocked both of us that Andy Reid spoke very glowingly of him today whenever he really didn't have to. He specifically said that he thinks that Niang will step straight into that second role, and he said, I'm not going to tell you he will be the starter.
So Andy Reid's a master at not saying anything, but still being. So normally when they don't say anything, it's annoying. I'm like, if you're not going to say anything, what are we doing? You know. But Andy will not say anything, but I still like listening to him. But in this scenario, he didn't have to say anything. You know what I thought Andy Reid would say there is, I haven't talked to the guys. We'll see how he does as we go along here.
Yeah.
That's the Andy Reid answer. And he said he didn't. Why did he use the word starter if he's not considering the possibility of Lucas Niang retaking that starting spot when he's fully healthy? And then instead he said, I'm not saying he's going to start, but I think he might move into the 2 deep.
Yeah.
So, that caught my attention for sure. And so the 2 tackles are the biggest thing that's been holding this offense down. Then on the offense, we already mentioned Hilaire, but the other negative is we taking hits to the receiving core.
Yeah. I think that there are a lot of positives, though, to talk about in the receiving group from this game.
Yeah. So Sky Moore had a great game. You were really excited about him this week.
And I think you can clearly see it in how much emotion he was putting out after every catch, and how many of them were in massive situations. The first was a 3rd and 7 on the opening drive. Tough contested catch. He had another 3rd and 7 where he beat Derwin James in man coverage for a long gain. Then there was a 1st and 10, another contested catch on the final drive of the game. And then the drive before that, right before the McKinnon fumble, he had a scramble drill where he dug a ball out of the dirt, and it was a really impressive throw and catch from Pat.
Yeah, so when you think about Sky Moore, and people being, myself included, thinking we were going to see more from him and it hasn't happened, you think about what kind of player is he? And, you've got like a Valdez-Scantling who has everything you would think of to say this guy is going to be an all-pro receiver. With the size and the speed, he's an athletic guy. Like, he should be a huge asset for us. And he's had a couple moments, but really he hasn't been that guy because he's a little bit inconsistent. He's inconsistent with catching easy passes and things like that. It seems like Sky Moore maybe doesn't have that type of upside, but just dependability and catching every ball that comes into your catch radius and being consistent with the way you run your routes and getting a good jump off the line of scrimmage.
I think Sky Moore has 2 traits that have the potential. It has to be shown consistently, but has the potential to be truly elite at the NFL level. And that's being a strong hands at the catch point. We saw that multiple times this week. And then he already has an excellent release ability. He can release inside or outside from any spot on the field against press coverage, against any kind of DB you want to throw at him. He is an excellent player off of the line of scrimmage.
So for me, when I thought, and I listened to the scouting reports on Sky Moore, I thought this is a guy that is going to be like a Hunter Renfrow. I mean, is that the kind of player comp you see?
I think that's the easy comp, because I think that role is his floor, where if it doesn't pan out long term, at worst he is a slot guy who has a lot of shake and who can get quick separation. But I think he was drafted to be an outside receiver.
I hope you're right. I also don't want to undervalue the ability on 4th and 2 to instantly shake the defender, be open for 2.5, and catch the ball every time. Like, you can't understate the
Yeah.
importance of that role. That was what Tyreek Hill did everything for this team, but he also, when we needed 2 yards, you knew that 2 seconds after the snap, or half a second after the snap, he would be where he needed to be.
Yeah.
So I think if we can at least utilize that, that's big. But if he can be a true outside receiver, I look forward to seeing what happens. And I look forward to seeing how much the team bets on him this offseason, because this is not a deep room of receivers who are signed for next year. So if they don't bring those guys back, I look forward to seeing what the team does with them. But right now, when we've got guys down, because right now we're down Hardman, we hope to get Juju back, but we're also down Tony with another hamstring. And that may be a thing where he's not available enough, and that's the problem with him. Yeah. So if that's the case, it's good to have a deep room where you feel like you can count on Justin Watson.
Yeah, and I was going to talk about Watson next. We've said it, I feel like, countless times throughout the season already, how much of a direct upgrade he is to a guy like Demarcus Robinson, who has been the third receiver on this team for the last 4 years. And Justin Watson is your wide receiver 5. And on a 3rd and 17, backed up against your own goal line, on a gotta-have-it drive, that's the guy that they're going to convert.
Yeah, so if you're going to draft between Robinson and Watson, and you go through a scouting combine with them, you're probably taking Robinson because of the measurables. Mm-hmm. He has the size and the length, and he's got the speed. But there's no question which player I would rather have. And that's the point I don't think I made very well when I was trying to compare Scantling to Sky Moore. That dependability over that upside is a huge thing. And I feel like Sky Moore, I can't personally remember him dropping a ball
He hasn't.
He's had like 12 receptions on 12 catchable balls. So,
yeah.
So really the biggest thing right now is we need to get more attempts for targets for Marcus Kemp.
Yeah. I think I actually, bringing up Kemp, I don't know. I think he may be out of practice squad elevations because you can only elevate a guy 3 times in the season. So they may have played all their cards on that one. Unless they sign him to the 53, I think that number would reset. So I don't know what they do going forward there if another guy has to miss time.
So another cool thing, I think, Andy Reid is so multiple in what we run on offense. I feel like if we had 3 wide receiver injuries during a game and we were sitting there in a game with only 2 active receivers, we could run a 3 tight end offense that puts up 30 points a game.
And they did this game.
There was a lot of it, yeah.
Noah Gray played, I believe, his career high in snaps. What you saw a lot this week whenever it was 3 tight ends was Justin Watson and the 3 tight ends, and that is an extremely large personnel package. And we saw the Chiefs run the ball out of it really well. Noah Gray only had 2 catches for 20 yards in this game, I believe, but you saw the long ball to Jody Fortson, and then he also had another really impressive catch on a slant early, and then obviously Travis Kelce doing what Travis Kelce does. But it is incredible, truly, that we are 10 years into this Andy Reid experience, and you don't know what you're getting on any given Sunday. You know it's probably going to work. Like, that's about it.
So there were a few key plays that left points on the board, but overall, I think that's an A-plus offensive performance. We've been going here for a little while talking about offensive personnel and maybe not even the most interesting thing that happened in this game. And I feel like as I watch it, I feel like I'm having unique thought processes, but apparently it's the same mindset all Chiefs fans are having. Nick Wright kind of echoed this same thing. End of game, the only way I feel like the Chiefs lose is when there's this roller coaster like this, if the clock runs out at the wrong point. Like it's all about clock management.
Mm-hmm.
And Nick Wright was saying he was almost glad they fumbled compared to he would rather have a fumble when the Chiefs are up 3 with 7 minutes left. He'd rather have a fumble than a field goal a couple minutes later. So I have my younger son watching the game with me, and Kansas City's driving down the field. There's 7 minutes left, up 3. And I said the worst thing that can happen here is that we have a 4-minute drive that ends in a field goal, because you can't give them the ball up 6 with enough time for them to use the whole clock. So then they're driving they're down 3, and there's still 6 minutes, 7 minutes left. You're thinking, the only scenario here where we lose is that they use the entire 7 minutes. And that's happened to Kansas City 3 times in the last 2 years that come right off the top of my head. Once this year against the Colts never were in a position to win that game until we let them get within 1 score, and then they used the last 8 minutes of the game. If they had given the ball back to Kansas City at any point, we'd come right back and score. But that's what happened in this game. We came into a situation where the clock looked pretty good for us. And when they get into the red zone with 2 minutes left and we got 3 timeouts, said the only way we lose this game is if they run more than 4 plays, which was 3 plays and a field goal is fine.
Yeah.
1 play and a touchdown's fine. The only way we lost that game is if there was because that's what I'm thinking. I hope that someone is standing on the defensive side of the ball, say, we cannot hold here, guys.
Yeah.
Because it was the Bengals it was the regular season game against the Bengals where it was like an impossible scenario for them to use all the clock, except they ran like 12 plays because they kept getting another automatic first down via penalty and used up the whole clock.
Yeah, and you sent it to me as soon as it... Basically, it was once Eckler picked up the first down to make it 1st and goal on the high side of the 2-minute warning, it was... Like you said, it was almost impossible that Kansas City wouldn't have the last possession. And in that situation, we were supremely confident that we would win the game.
So there's a couple different mindsets there. There's the, let's run the ball and on first down, maybe even intentionally be tackled inside the 1-yard line, which is what the Bengals kind of did. Mm-hmm. They didn't try to score because they had the tie in their pocket. Mm-hmm. They said we'd almost rather tie
and go to overtime
or use all the clock. But the last thing the Bengals wanted was to score.
We're not going to give you this ball back with a minute left.
And generally, that's a loser's mindset. Because if your philosophy there is, we're losing in the game, but we're not going to try to score, that can come back to bite you when you, I guess worst case, you're probably settling for a field goal. But Andy Reid, in those scenarios, he goes for the end zone. He's not playing around there.
It's an offensive mind's approach, because Sean Payton talked about it today with Colin Cowherd, that people criticize play callers in that situation for scoring too quickly. And Sean Payton said, I've mastered the ability to use all of the clock and kick a field goal. He said, I really haven't figured out yet how to score touchdowns slowly. Because if you're going to score a touchdown, you don't turn it down. You don't kneel down at the 1 whenever you are down 4 points.
Yeah, so it's hard to criticize the Chargers there. The only way they win that game is to run more plays. And so the best philosophy to win is...
They should have ran the ball on 2nd and goal.
Yeah, but it's hard to criticize a team who's trailing, scoring a touchdown. But it's the situation where, as the defense, there have been a lot of Chiefs games where I said, let him score. Mm-hmm. And not games where we were winning, and I said, let him score so they can take the lead and we can go win it again, because you have that kind of confidence in your offense.
And you kind of led off with this here, is that we haven't talked about this 2-minute drive by the offense. And I think, because to me, that's really not even the headline or the story of the game, because like we said, a minute 46 with 2 timeouts, there was no doubt to me that they were scoring, barring a penalty on a second or a third down or something like that would massively set them back, or some kind of fluky turnover.
Yeah, and so I love, one of my favorite things during a game is to bring up the ESPN Gamecast and look at what the expected win percentage is at that moment of the game and kind of debate that among who I'm watching it with. For instance, at that point, it was like an 80% chance when we were getting the ball back, down by 4 with a minute 46, they have an 80% chance of winning. Like, that is, they're supposed to be factoring in how good you are.
Yeah.
Because, like, the Chargers in the first quarter had a lead and we had a 60% chance of winning because they ranked us before the game as a better team. Mm-hmm. So they do factor that in. But how you're saying that Mahomes has a 20% chance of scoring a touchdown there is baffling. Because to me, when they scored that touchdown, I said, this should read as a 70% win chance for Kansas City. Because I think it's at least 70% chance that he's going to go score that touchdown. Now, if a ball's batted at the line of scrimmage and intercepted, like, that can happen. That's the other 30%.
Right.
But just them stuffing us on 4 plays for 10 yards is unlikely.
And that's the thing about it, is that drive was almost completely effortless. I mean, we got to 1 third down, and it was the holding call on Derwin James that it's how people cover Travis Kelce, is to hold him every play, and they're gonna call that on you in crucial situations if they haven't all game long. So they saw 1 third down on the entire drive. Mahomes was flawless, getting the ball out quickly, picked up 20 yards with a scramble. I mean, that drive was never in question.
And then one of my favorite things, and it's all speculation, but that was the first time I'd seen in our hurry-up offense. Kansas City's had a very successful hurry-up offense, scoring before half, at the end of games, in those situations. But I'd never seen that type of hand signal used, where as we're running up to the line of scrimmage in a hurry-up, he's giving big sweeping motions and different things like that, and it's like there were designated plays where everyone knew what that was, and it's almost surprising to me that you don't see that more. Mm-hmm. Now, you'd have to change them, because if you use the same ones every week, obviously that's going to be something they can key on. But that drive just felt so effortless.
Yeah. It's hard to express, because it's like you said with the even during the broadcast, they put it on as a 24% win probability for Kansas City. And if you had polled Chiefs fans either at the game or at home, they would have said 85%. Like, there was no doubt at all.
And I was trying to be realistic, saying 70, and my other son is like, oh, no way, it's more like 50%. I'm like, if you take out teams, if it's a generic team, you might say it's less than 50%, but this is not just any team, and we've seen it too many times.
Yeah. And
then that didn't end the game. I mean,
the defense had to close it out.
Yeah. So Herbert, 31 seconds. And they had their timeouts. That's plenty of time to get in field goal range. And he did not manage it well. On the last play, that ball didn't need to be thrown. You're not in a desperate situation right there. Get it out of bounds and get a play that works for you.
Yeah, that and they ran 2 plays, and we had some debate about the first one, about we can't even tell still on whether or not that was some kind of designed quarterback draw, or if he just saw a look that he thought he could escape and get 20 quick yards. But either way, I mean, he made that decision instantly and then was sacked by Chris Jones. And then, like you said, some of it is circumstantial, I'm sure, but Justin Herbert leads the league in fourth quarter interceptions since he became the starter. And that ball was ill-advised is the only way to describe it. There were two guys that got a hand on it, and it just so happened to be tipped up in the air where a guy could make a play on it.
And it's a situation where Mahomes had the same thing happen to him against Buffalo. We're in a desperate last-second situation. He threw a pick. And it was a bad pick.
Mm-hmm.
So it can happen, but it's about what percentage does it happen. You know, if you're in 10 of those situations and 8 times you deliver, you are an all-time great. And for Justin Herbert, it seems like his percentage in those situations so far in his career has been pretty low for a guy who has that much talent.
I mean, this is 2 weeks in a row that the game has ended for them on an interception where they had a drive to tie the game with less than a minute. And those are difficult situations, but that's what you get paid for as a quarterback.
And we make so many jokes, and it's the whole chargering thing is a thing Kansas City fans have been saying forever, and it's catching on with the national media that that team feels so talented. I mean, you look at top 2 receivers, their top 2 receivers are as good as anyone in the league. Quarterback, as talented as any in the league. Great running back. Now, they're all-pro left tackles out, but that team is stacked with weapons. Then you look at the defense. They have 2 great defensive ends. One of them was out in this game. Bosa is one of the best players in the NFL, and so is Derwin James. Derwin James is a phenomenal football player. Why can they not put it together? I mean, if you look at, say, now, to be fair, Kansas City is missing several guys this week. And, you know, by design, one of our starting tackles is out on offense, and 2 receivers, and we lose during the game a 3rd receiver, we lose a safety. And so every team's dealing with that. But if you line up every team at full strength with nobody missing, you say, who's the scariest teams out here for Kansas City to play? Nobody's scarier to play than the Chargers, unless Buffalo is there with them, but that should not be a 5-5 football team no matter how many injuries you have.
And the weird thing about the Chargers specifically, for my entire football fandom, it's been the exact same issues year after year, despite who the quarterback is, who the coach is, or they swap stars in and out throughout over time. You know, a guy retired, like Antonio Gates goes out, and then Keenan Allen is suddenly a top flight receiver, and it's just every year they're horrible at situational football, and they are consistently the most injured team in the league. It's unprecedented.
Yeah, and so to me, and here's the thing about greatness is, it's a movie quote from an old movie, but you become the rock that people break themselves against. Whenever you're going to see that team, if Kansas City wasn't what Kansas City is, I mean, they're 5-3 against the rest of the league.
Mm-hmm.
And had a chance to win both Kansas City games. So that could be a 7-3 team. And you could be talking about Staley being this hot up-and-coming coach. And he might get fired.
Yeah.
And then you've got the Raiders and the Broncos just doing stupid things to try to match.
Yeah.
Desperate things. So individually, none of those moves are bad, but you've got the division putting themselves into cap. They're destroying their salary caps. They're trading away top picks, and they're going to be in bad situations. I mean, how do the Broncos recover from the Russell Wilson thing unless they find a coach who can make him look like he looked 5 years ago?
Yeah. The Broncos and Raiders have put themselves in a seriously terrible long-term outlook. Like, the Broncos don't have any picks, and they're paying that guy $45 million to be one of the 3 worst quarterbacks in football.
Yeah. And I mean, they've got a great defense, but I just don't see how that becomes an elite franchise again with the situation. I mean, that could, not to derail it about the Broncos, but that could go down as like the worst trade in NFL history.
Yeah, it's up there as it stands right now.
Now, let's say what the Chargers, with all that talent, what is their best game of the season? So they had a close win against the Raiders. They lost to the Chiefs. They were absolutely destroyed by the Jaguars, 38-10. They beat the Texans by 10. They squeaked out a 2-point win over the Browns, an overtime win against the Broncos, lost by 2 touchdowns to the Seahawks, a miracle, fluky, lucky win against the Falcons, lost to the 49ers. What is, if you look at the schedule...
They don't have an impressive win.
So what is the best game the Chargers have played this year? It'd probably be flipping a coin between one of the 2 losses to the Chiefs.
That's what I was going to say, is their claim to fame right now, and why people, even still at 5-5, are saying that they believe they can be a good team that can get healthy and go on a run, is that twice now, in games that they clearly knew were more important, they have played the Chiefs well. And
all of that adds up to a 1-3 or 1-4 record Justin Herbert has against Mahomes. It's 1-4 because of the one game he had against Henne.
Mm-hmm.
So at some point, if you want to be the man, you got to beat the man.
Yeah.
And as a football fan, it doesn't get much better than dominating your division like this. An unprecedented run of divisional dominance and going on 7 consecutive division titles. That's almost locked up.
It's a golden era of Chiefs football.
Only happened 2 more times. It's don't normalize greatness, because I have a tendency to like already be stressing about how we're going to lose in 2 weeks to the Bengals or something.
Mm-hmm.
Like, let's enjoy this.
Yeah.
And so let's talk about, this show's getting a little long already, but let's talk about the defensive performance. Nick Bolton had the 2 penalties, but also was part of both turnovers.
Yeah.
14 tackles.
Mm-hmm.
Like, you can go right down the line of impressive guys. Who do you want to start with as most impressive defender today?
It's got to be Chris Jones, who is hands down having an all-pro year. I think at this point, nobody's arguing that this is the best season of his entire career. And that's really saying something for a guy that in 2018 had 15.5 sacks.
Saying Chris Jones is almost at this point of the year like saying Mahomes. Yeah, well, we know Chris Jones was great,
right.
But who else was great?
Yeah.
But Chris Jones did have a great game because, you know, at the end, the game was not over when he made back-to-back game-changing plays. He stopped if Herbert passes Jones, what is there, 20 yards of open field? And then on the very next play, he blows it up, and it's an interception.
Yeah. Other guys on the defense, Trent McDuffie I don't remember off the top of my head a single time they challenged him at all. Not down the field or even in the quick short game. They just didn't throw the ball at him.
If an opponent puts up 27 points and you can't remember any plays by a corner, that corner had a good game.
Yeah. I think Joshua Williams had a little bit of a rough night. That long pass to Keenan Allen was, I think they're never going to call it, but Keenan Allen clearly pushed off of him 40 yards down the field. And then I don't know specifically that it was on him, the first touchdown to Palmer, but Jalen Watson was competing. Joshua Williams was there a lot. The defensive line, though, as a whole, after a rough first half, was really impressive in the second half.
Yeah, and if you look at the defensive line, I was on the rewatch. I was watching Colin Saunders a little bit, and it felt like he was not playing the way he had. Like he felt like he may have been out of gas. Maybe the fact he's been on a snap count's a good thing because you get that Colin Saunders when he plays fewer snaps. But most of the other guys, Mike Dana obviously, and those weren't just like fluky situational plays. he made good rushes and got 2 sacks.
Yeah.
And
I think Frank looked really good in his first game back.
we talked about the rarity of the 5-sack game for this defense, and that's 2 in a row.
Right. And Willie Gay with a perfectly timed and executed blitz where he came untouched. I think Dunlap had a handful of really impressive plays in the run game.
Yeah, Chris Jones said there was a lot of leaky yardage in the first half, which is a good description, that a lot of plays that looked like 3 yards and ended up being 7. So the tackling maybe could have been a little better, but there was a lot to like. And this is not the Chiefs' offense. The standard is you've been the best in the NFL. You are the best in the NFL. We expect those high scoring outputs. And this defense, what we need is maybe a little above average. If this defense is above average, we're a Super Bowl team. And if they go beyond that, then we're winning every game.
The things that are being overlooked, I think, specifically on the defensive line, last year the Kansas City Chiefs were last in the AFC in sacks. They had 29 sacks in 17 games. Through 10 games this season, the Chiefs have 32 sacks. I don't know the number specifically. I know that they had 9 tackles for loss in this game, and already, again, through 10 weeks, have more tackles for loss in this season than any other season under Steve Spagnuolo. That is a massive difference. And then secondly, as much as the defense was not great in that first half, like I said, I think the D-line got pushed around a little bit in the run game in the first half. A couple of big plays in the secondary where guys just were getting open against zone coverage. But in the second half, the Chiefs' defense forced 2 turnovers and allowed 1 drive that had any kind of real success, and it was the gotta-have-it touchdown drive to take the lead.
Yep, and I saw a lot of criticism on the coaching staff this week as well, but when you notice that you're consistently the better team in the second half and your own performance is better second half to first half, I feel like we're making better adjustments than our opponents. And this game, I think we out-coached. Andy Reid is a better coach than...
Yeah, I think I'd give him a slight edge.
And what was the difference in the game? How would you describe the difference? It was a slight edge kind of game, right?
Right, yeah.
And I know that's tongue-in-cheek about the coaching difference, but it's a good feeling to know that we're making better adjustments. And same thing throughout the season. It seems like we're getting stronger as we go along. And this was not a good team mid-season last year, and it took off. And it feels kind of like that's where we're trending again.
And one thing, too, I want to say, I've talked before about how much I think Joe Cullen is having an impact on this team, specifically about how open Chris Jones has been, about how he feels that relationship has been beneficial. But I'm full ready to give that man his flowers, because just those 2 things I pointed to specifically. And I like Brendan Daly. I think he is a good defensive coach. You don't coach under Bill Belichick on the defensive side of the ball for a decade without knowing some stuff. I was excited when we brought him in. But there has been a clear uptick in production across the board on the defensive line whenever they have brought in Joe Cullen. Mike Dana having a career year. Chris Jones having a career year. Frank Clark, I don't know how much of that goes to Cullen. It seems like he's much more motivated and in better shape. But again, probably having his best season as a Chief, excluding a playoff run. And then, Turk Wharton was being productive before he got hurt. Colin Saunders is, for the first time in his career, getting significant snaps. It's really impressive what they've done with that group in 1 year, while only really having the additions of Karlaftis and Dunlap.
Yep. So now I want to say the most frustrating thing about this game. I was really frustrated with officiating, but I think everyone was pretty frustrated that we're still making special teams mistakes. Mm-hmm. And this week, it would have been a pretty clean special teams game, except for the Pacheco catching the kickoff and using intention and a toe tap to keep it in bounds so that he can step out of bounds.
Yeah.
I understand this is a rookie, and he's also an offensive player learning that whole system, but man, it feels like you cannot be this late into the season and making that kind of mistake.
Yeah, it was a backbreaker. It killed all the momentum of that let's go get a touchdown and take the lead before the half drive. But the one thing I'll say about that is that is a very easily correctable mistake.
It just feels like we've had a great special teams coach, and it feels like this year we have poorly coached special teams.
Yeah.
I don't know what the story is there, but hopefully it gets fixed.
The only other issue this week, this was the first game of the season that the Chiefs did not miss a kick, which is awesome. We'll hope that continues. But the only other issue on special teams this week, which if we can slowly whittle that down to 0 by the time the playoffs start, instead of it being at 94 during the Colts game, that's pretty good. But they gave up, I think, 2 pretty good returns on kickoff. The punt coverage was fine. Sky Moore, whenever Tony went out, he did a fine job fielding the one punt he saw. So overall, a much better game than we've seen several times this year.
So just to summarize where we're at, I think Kansas City is playing great football, and the schedule is softening.
Yeah.
And the concern I have right now is I think getting the 1 seed is a big deal. That's not even debatable. It's very important to get the 1 seed. Not especially if you have a 7 seed that could be the Chargers or the Bengals. You say we could either just sit at home and watch on TV, or we could play the Chargers or the Bengals. That is a big deal.
Yeah.
And so we've got to not have any slip-up games, because looking at the schedule and thinking, man, we have an easy run except for the Bengals game. And I don't want to make light of the Seahawks, but the Bengals game is the only game where the other team can beat us without us beating ourselves.
The Chiefs have 7 games left, and 5 of them are against bottom 5 teams.
Yeah, and so that schedule looks good, but you can't slip up. You can't have a game exactly like we saw last night and then lose on the last possession to the Bengals, because I think the Baltimore Ravens are not in the Kansas City class. I don't even think they're better than the Chargers necessarily, but they have an easier schedule than Kansas City. So the Ravens have the second easiest schedule, but if you really just sit down and look at it, they have the easiest schedule left all the way up until week 18 when they play the Bengals. And that could be a game where they could be playing for first place in the division, or the Bengals could be fighting for their playoff lives. But the Ravens do not play a legitimate winning team the rest of the way. So they may not lose again, and I think if we lose 1 game and they lose none, they're probably taking that tiebreaker. So there's really no margin for error at 8-2.
Yeah. Where my sights are, obviously, the rest of the way is on Kansas City getting the bye, but I would like either the Chargers or the Bengals to outright miss the playoffs. Right now, the Chargers are basically a coin flip to make the playoffs, and the Bengals are like 63-64%. So one of those teams will probably be out unless both the Jets and the Patriots fall off.
I love looking at these scenarios. The closer you get to the end, the more I like to look at remaining schedules and games that are 2 contenders playing, and it's hard to decide what you're rooting for and all the tiebreaker stuff. So I look forward to that. I'm hoping that some of these other teams drop 1 more and we can coast in.
Yeah.
Because I don't think Kansas City loses more than 1.
It'd be awesome if that week 18 game against the Raiders didn't mean anything.
Yep. So I think that'll about wrap this show up, but I appreciate you guys taking time to watch, and we'll see you on the next one.